First off, let me introduce myself, and I'm Pat Daley. I'm a partner with Deloitte. I've worked in around payments for probably 25 plus years, having led our payments practice for quite some time. And I'd say blockchain is one of those things that I've experienced in my career that I personally think will make a really large impact on payments. But we're here today to talk about, from concept to commercialization, how do we really realize the impact of that? We've got a great panel here who've had tales of planes, trains, and automobiles to get here. So a little sleep deprived, but very excited to share their thoughts and experiences with you. So we'll just start off with a real quick round of introduction. We'll start with Marley.
Hi, Marley Gray. I'm the Director for Technology Strategy and Business Development for Blockchain at Microsoft.
So I'm Victor Wong. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the enterprise blockchain infrastructure company, Blockapps.
Good morning, bonjour à tous. My name is Tim Grant. I'm a Managing Director and the head of the R3 Lab and Research Center.
Wonderful. So just to get to know the audience a little bit, we've got some poll questions. And if you go to your application, if you go to this session, in the upper right-hand part of that, there'll be a poll. And so the first poll question is just to tell us a little bit about yourself. What part of the ecosystem do you work with? All right, we've got a really great mix here as it keeps moving about. Wow. So we have the banks are in the lead at the moment. It's like watching a horse race right now. Okay, this gives us a bit of an indication of who's in the audience. So a lot of banks, but very, very evenly split between everybody else. Let's move to the next one. So what's your level of understanding of distributed ledger technology or blockchain technology? I'm going to use those two terms interchangeably. Okay, so we have a lot of people who are, we have nearly 70% or over 70% who would call themselves beginners or newbies. And then next question is, what do you think the impact of distributed ledger technology will be? Is it a fad, evolution, or revolution? Okay. Very, very low on the fad. It will pass. So I think we're all okay.
Who's the two people?
That was me. That was me.
Or the one person. And then finally, just for fun, have you ever owned any Bitcoins?
Or Ether, we should probably
Or
toss
Ether.
that in.
Ether.
Any cryptocurrency.
Any form of cryptocurrency that has gone up in a dramatic way in the last few months. Okay. So a little bit. So this is really helpful for us to get to know you and kind of where your heads are at right now when it comes to blockchain technology. So we'll start off, and I'll just ask some questions to the panel. And if we think about the understanding of the audience here, so a lot of people who are newer to blockchain technology. I'm wondering if I'll start with Victor. Talk to us about, what can blockchain technology do that other technologies can't do?
That's a great question. I think, first of all, there's a confusion often between blockchains because they are a type of databases and what we use traditional databases for. If you think about the way most organizations handle transactions, whether these are under one organization or across many parties, you have multiple counterparties, and typically in order to make sure that transaction happened, some human beings have to get involved. these are typically compliance departments, fraud screening, operations, or in some cases, third parties like SWIFT or ACH. What blockchains allow you to do is to confirm those transactions by eliminating all those third parties. You can do it directly between the counterparties in a way that's trusted and secure.
And can't you do that with any other technologies?
Unfortunately not. Current databases, the challenge is that any centralized database can be too easily changed by one party. And because of that, it doesn't build trust among the various counterparties.
Okay, so a lot of it's about trust then.
Absolutely,
And,
yes.
and the validation of that. One of the other questions that's been on my mind, and so we're in pretty early days with the technology, and I'd say we're well into the hype cycle. And my question is, what needs to be true in order for blockchain to realize its potential in the market? And I'll start with you, Marley, because I know you just published a paper and had some great announcements yesterday on this.
Sure, yeah. So that was probably one of the big questions that we posed to ourselves, was what is preventing, I fought fiercely to call it distributed ledger and lost to marketing hype. So now I call it blockchain and have said, okay, I'll give up that pure fight. But what we did was look at, from an enterprise standpoint, what would it take to get our financial institutions and our primary enterprise customers to be able to adopt this technology to really change the way they do their business. And so we spent probably 6-7 months investigating what those pieces were, and they come down to I'll call them the illities, the scalability, the manageability. Performance doesn't have ility in it, but performance, privacy, security, obviously, and just core functionality that we would expect in a mature platform. That is largely absent. Well, it is absent in blockchain technology today. And we feel at Microsoft, we said, well, we can play a role in this ecosystem to try to, we often call it the raise the tide sort of strategy for all of the distributed ledgers. So there's not going to be one implementation that's going to meet every requirement that you need, but we will find common uses and capabilities that are needed across blockchain implementations that Microsoft can provide that infrastructure, and also market confidence that when Microsoft says we're going to go do something and we've announced it, that should indicate to the industry, both the software industry and our customer industries, that we are committed to do this, and we're going to put wood behind this arrow to really make it come to life.
Great. Tim, do you have anything else to add in terms of what would need to be true to realize the possibilities?
So, it's kind of fascinating when you look at this crazy hype cycle that we're still in, apparently. And you look at the end state that one way or another, everyone seems to buy into the end state somehow, that this is going to save lots of money, make things efficient, and create new business opportunity. And partly because most of us lived through the internet era and kind of see the parallels. But it's a great dichotomy because at the end of the day, we also don't see how anything can happen anytime soon. So everyone's kind of got this weird duality that they've got to live. And I think what's interesting to some of you may not know, and I don't think this was done by design, is that our respective companies, we're all working together. So we all have partnerships, literally trilaterally, we all have partnerships. And I think that's the core. What has to happen in order for this to get anywhere is everyone's going to have to collaborate. Of course, I would say that because we're part of a consortium of global financial institutions. But you think beyond R3, we're all saying that. That was a big message, Marley, that you delivered yesterday. It's big in the way that Blockapps and consensus work. So a prerequisite for any of this to actually happen is we're all going to have to work together to figure it out. And I think that's becoming really obvious. And for those of you that were in the session yesterday with the Bank of Canada and CPA and Royal Bank of Canada, you'll have seen that's yielding some fruit because it's collaboration.
You know, it's a huge common theme that we've heard. You know, the buzz, you know, in all the sessions and outside of the rooms has been around collaboration and partnerships. One thing I wanted to follow up with you, Tim, is that you recently presented at the White House to their group on science and technology. And so I was wondering if you could comment on, you know, your reflections on that, but then also extend that to think about, well, what role would governments and regulators play as we start to move towards commercialization?
Cool. Yeah. Well, the 15-year-old in me was super excited to be presenting the President's Council of Advisors in Science and Technology. That was really kind of groovy at the was it the National Academy of Sciences in DC, and walking in, and they were literally talking about, and I seriously, they were talking about blowing asteroids out of the sky. That was the session before us, so it was all a bit surreal, frankly. It's hard to follow that up. And Eric Schmidt from Google was sitting right there, so it was all a bit bananas. But what's interesting about it is that the fact that has gotten on the agenda of such an august committee, and indeed others we've seen since then. Adam Ludwin from Chain has spoken in front of the Fed, and a large number of other regulators. We're actually talking to a whole bunch of regulators in DC on Tuesday. I know that everybody here talks to regulators. We're all talking to regulators. You know, but the fact that it got to the President's Council is kind of in itself kind of a statement, I think, was interesting. You still find that even in that room, and you've got some of the finest minds in the country, that there's just this lack of complete understanding of what this really is all about. And again, that's the other dichotomy. On the one hand, you've got billions of dollars being invested in this one way or another. You know, the cycle is akin to the 90s in the internet, and by some metrics outstripping the sort of level of interest and level of engagement that you've seen. But nevertheless, vast swaths of the financial services community and beyond still don't really get it. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy. But yeah, it was really great fun, and you can go and check that out online. By the way, the video's online. It's kind of funny. But the serious part of it is, and we're talking about, you know, the commercialization. How do you get from the vision to the execution, from the hype to the reality, to actually some of this making a difference in our lifetimes and in our careers? I always talk about it as the 5 Ps. You go from proof of concept to a prototype to a pilot and to production. And there's one missing, which is the 5th P, which is permission. Someone in a highly regulated industry like this, which is not like the internet, which was not a highly regulated industry, is going to have to give you permission to do the things that we're sort of envisaging when we come up with these thousands of use case ideas that you hear about every day. So there is no other way, and I think our respective organizations have figured this out, but to engage with the central banks and regulators early and often. You can't get stuck in this chicken and egg where you go to the regulators and you say, hey, we've built this, what do you think? Can you endorse it? Because they'll say, no, I'm not going to endorse a piece of technology. And then you're in a stalemate. And so I think the outcome is starting to be really positive. Little data points like Commissioner Giancarlo of the CFTC speaking publicly and espousing the virtues of a do no harm policy, which is exactly what happened back in the early internet era. The European Central Bank have said something similar. And more than that, not just doing no harm, and we were all talking about this earlier, and we all fundamentally agree on this one, having them involved. So the session that you guys saw yesterday is a great example, but there are many, many more than that. There are actively central banks and regulators in engaging with groups of participants in understanding and developing this roadmap. That's what's going to get us somewhere. But we need more of that. I think that will probably look back at 2016. 2015 was the year of hype. 2016 will be the year that we actually started to get things moving. And 2017, hopefully, we'll actually see some real progress and maybe even some production systems. You heard it here first.
So your advice to regulators and to governments would be to get involved, get active, get busy involved in collaborating early rather than waiting to see what happens and then, provide provincial regulation on top of that.
Yeah, do no harm is fine, but not wait and see.
Yeah.
It's got to be do no harm and get involved and opine, and get a node. I walked out of one of the regulators a few weeks ago, and we offered them a node. Come into our lab and use one of the ledgers. And it was quite funny. At the end of it, the woman in charge said, "No one's ever come in and offered me a node before. That's a new one." And you're like, well, everyone should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the whole. This is it, and it kind of demystifies it when you see it on your screen, and you're like, oh, that's a node. Okay, I've got a node. Cool.
So switching gears a little bit, we're here, it's a payments conference, and this is Payments Canada's conference, but we are seeing blockchain technologies make a difference in other industries, and certainly very pervasively in the financial services industry beyond payments and capital markets, trade finance, and so on. And I was just wondering if you could share what you're seeing in other industries or in other areas of the financial services industry that we can learn from in payments. And I'll start off with you, Victor.
Yeah, so Blockapps is working with over 90 companies at this point, and Fortune 500 companies in areas like finance, banking, insurance, but also areas like supply chain, energy, healthcare. And it's very interesting, the different types of use cases that they're all pursuing. I would say broadly where people are seeing the most traction in these use cases are anywhere where the technology is causing an increasing number of human beings to have to get involved. I mentioned compliance. We were working with one banking client that said in 2007 they had a compliance department of 50 people. Today, that department is 800 people. So, and we see this across various industries as the transaction volume continues to increase. So, and another use case we're working on is, for example, the identity use case. In many cases, can you track both assets but people in anonymous ways where the individual has control over the information that they expose? So for example, in healthcare, the project that we're working under is that we can store all the patient's healthcare records on the blockchain, and instead of having one organization hold those records permanently where they lose control, the person can expose those records depending on who they want to see them. So if they go to a doctor or enter a hospital, they can expose those records and bring them back.
Just open it up to other folks.
So I'll sort of build on top of that. We're seeing interest, of course, in all industries, and customers we meet with, they'll fly out and we'll dig just 2 inches below the surface and quickly find opportunities in any industry where blockchain could address, and really make them rethink business processes that add a lot of overhead to their overall cost of doing business, but they've never revisited. And this is more of the catalyst moment for people to stop and go, wait a minute, we could rethink the way we do our business today. And so one of the interesting things in industries, so healthcare, building on that, is it's usually where we have the intersection between industries. So in healthcare, in payments in particular, between patient, the provider, and the payments that have to get played. And you have the insurance companies involved, and of course this varies by nationality. But in how does that from the patient record to patient handoff between providers? You have procedures where you have multiple providers, maybe it's a surgical procedure, and multiple providers providing services. How do payments get split and make it less confusing for the patient, but allow them to have control? So we're seeing, finance is probably the one, and payments is probably the one, both payments and liquidity across all industries that will need to be able to intersect with blockchains across these industries. And that's probably one of the first uses that we're seeing from an interoperability standpoint is how do we make a healthcare chain be able to interoperate with a payments chain within a financial services organization. So, that's a very interesting intersection.
Well, that's probably true if you extend it into any other industry like supply chain and
Yep.
payments. And I think what you're highlighting here is that, most transactions that happen between two enterprises, it's a smart contract, but then there's usually some sort of, financial interaction too. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is that when you're starting to think about the uses and what we might think about from a payments point of view is don't just think about the payments, actually think about how it's integrated across the entire, value chain of whatever industry.
And there's opportunity
Yeah.
that hasn't been present before. If you were just doing payments and you weren't really tied into the overall business process, now we see payments being a part of the overall business process and having to flow across organizations. That flow and the services that you could provide there's a tremendous opportunity. You might see, disintermediation of one business that would spawn, if you invest correctly, you spawn huge businesses in value-added services for those transactions.
Yeah, and to add to that, one of the things, because we work across industries, what we're seeing is that relative to other industries, the financial industry is actually relatively efficient. People complain bitterly about, T+3 settlements. But in the supply chain industry, if you net 60, that's considered hyper efficient. But we're doing projects in sort of the IP publishing space where an artist, to get paid for, one of their works being used, they have to wait 3 years for that payment to happen.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
I totally agree.
You talk about a role in payments modernization and what blockchain could do. But on that, and that's been one of the big themes here, is around modernization. I mean, what role might you see blockchain playing in something like payments modernization?
Isn't that the big question? Here's one of the big sort of dirty secrets of this industry, right? That nobody really knows yet, but that's okay, right? So in order to know what the net present value of transition is going to be for your enterprise level technology spend, which is usually in the 9-10 digits or more, to be deployed to remove decades of technological debt fueled by excessive profits at one point, which turned into now no money to do anything anymore, and excessive pressure on costs. In order to make that decision, for people to make large decisions, they're going to have to know what the end state is, so they can actually calculate the net present value transition. I don't think we know the answer, but we know that the elements of this technology are so fundamental and so effective in doing things that have been done really badly with other technologies that it kind of has to. And that's sort of the general feel, like this has to work. Is blockchain the answer to everything? If when unicorns and pixie dust will come along and everything will change and everything will be on a blockchain in the future? Clearly not. Does it have potentially as seismic an effect on our daily lives as the internet did? 100%. Most people believe in that now, and I think you saw by the poll, like there's only the two of you who were only joking really, who said it was going to be a fad. But no one really knows the answer yet. But that in order to sort of make those steps together, we've got to look at it in short-term bursts of understanding. So, the 6-month work that you just talked about, Marley, I'm sure with your 90 clients, you work on small pieces of work that move the ball forward. You're not going to set up a project that's going to last 2 years. No one's doing that. People are setting up projects that are lasting a few months maximum, so that they can generate a piece of belief that you can send up through the chain to the C-suite, so they keep at the table. And it feels like the pivot is happening from the sort of hype slowly to that point where the belief is sufficient that we're going to stick it all the way through and answer that very question: how does this affect payments? How does this affect all the use cases of the thousands which come up every day? It's amazing how many use cases you hear about. I'm sure we could sit and brainstorm and come up with a few hundred ourselves that hadn't actually been thought of before.
And To pick up on the point you were making, and I think in Jerry's session earlier today, he said, probably 75% of the audience is doing some proof of concept around using blockchain, and that's probably true based on what I understand in the industry. And a lot of people are doing those proof of concepts, and they're doing them in isolation. They're doing that for purposes of speed and to, learn from it and then make a decision about what they do going forward. And, this session really is around concept to commercialization, and wanted to get your thoughts about, how do you move from proof of concept into that commercialization? And also, how do you then start to integrate it with some of your legacy systems? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we've got two schools of thought on that. So we have some software vendors out there that are trying to build solutions that are that you can simply go buy, which I think in the long run those will be sort of point solutions in time. More effectively, what actually is we're defining the collaborative economy, and to get to anything out of a proof of concept is you have to have collaborators. And some of the collaboration partners that you have will be fierce competitors with you. Mm-hmm. We see this in R3 and some of the work that we've had to do to make sure that the lab environment is one where everyone is comfortable coming in and not feeling that they're exposing themselves to their competitors in a way that will lead to disadvantage in the long run, but they see mutual benefit. So, and that collective collaboration, it goes. If it's true, if we look at physics models, we look at models that work at the small scale, do they work at the large scale, and we have problems with that in physics. But in reality, we think that even at the smallest scale, you have to have collaboration and collaborate all the way up to the largest implementation to really realize the full potential here. It is a it's an open party, and everyone should be participating. Yeah. We have customers that see their businesses, their fundamental businesses being threatened, and you can do one of two things, and you can look at the history books and see, companies that they don't want to be the next Blockbuster Video or the bookstore that got run out. They want to. They can then engage and say, how do I change my business and create value on top of that, and that ultimately create a larger business with more value and expand your market. So we see we call it creative destruction in certain circumstances, but once everybody gets on board, it's sort of inevitable. Like, it has to happen. You're going to have critical mass, and we're seeing that now. Not just in financial services, we're going to see it rapidly in multiple industries.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we're seeing in most of our proof of concept use cases is we ask organizations, like, look around your organization and find a place where the current processes are broken because of coordination. And then this is a place that's easy to bring a blockchain on board, where you don't have to kind of get a lot of buy-in. People already understand that this is a difficult problem. One example, for example, we worked with a wealth management client. To onboard clients, they had lots of parties, lots of external vendors, and typically took 8 to 12 months to onboard a single client. So in the proof of concept stage, they used a blockchain to basically track where this client was in the entire process, and they were able to bring the time down to weeks. Now, of course, if you completely onboarded all the vendors where people could put in the system, you could probably bring that down to minutes. But even showing that kind of efficiency is enough to take you to the next step.
And because you have an enterprise, platform solution, what should people be thinking about as they start to think about integrating it within the legacy environment to go more to production?
Yeah, the key thing is no enterprise wants to reinvent the wheel to experiment. They want to work with companies that can build connectors into their existing systems, bring those in, and what we call essentially nowadays parallel systems. One challenge that we've seen in many organizations is, particularly banks, is as they scaled up, they've done this by acquiring smaller banks with all these legacy systems. So one of the things that we help them with on blockchains is we bring all these different systems to have one repository of information where they can see these things happening in real time. And that's a great starting point for many of them.
Okay, so orchestrating amongst all the legacy systems or running in parallel
Exactly,
as
exactly.
well.
And using it for, and instead of having to wait for monthly reports or quarterly reports, you can see closer to real time what's happening amongst these systems.
Mm-hmm. And Tim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's, I think maybe take a step back briefly and for 10 seconds explain what R3 is. R3 came together by a group of large banks who had been doing for quite some time a lot of work in this space and realized that they couldn't do it alone. Why would banks ever join a consortium and work together? That just doesn't make any sense, as the 80% of you that are banks here would all understand. You're not very good at that. I was a banker for years, and we're not good at it. Suddenly, everything's changed, and why? Because they realize it's a fundamentally peer-to-peer paradigm, and therefore, we're going to keep saying it. You have to collaborate. So now we're up to 54 global financial institutions. We're excited that the National Bank of Canada has joined us recently to make our sixth local in Canada. So, but we're building, beyond the banks into insurance companies, exchanges, clearinghouses, credit cards, etc. So why tell that story? Well, because they're all of these institutions are thinking about the exact title of this session. It's how on earth are we going to get this to a commercial reality in production? So the way that we've gone about it, and my 5 Ps are the ones that we kind of live by. We need to organize ourselves to answer all of the questions. So systems integration is one question. Yeah. It's a key question. In some respects, just like I said earlier, unless you know what the end state is, we can't really truly understand what the system integration requirements are going to be, but we can certainly think about it already. Security, the illities, or the ones that you mentioned, yeah. we have the same ones, right? We have projects of groups of institutions working together over short periods of time collaboratively to think about identity, think about security, interoperability, systems integration, privacy, specific deep dives on use cases, and some of that work is fail fast. Okay, that didn't work, and some of it's then we break through, move forward, next phase. But the flip side of all this is that you actually can't just have one constituency within your institution working on it either, because there isn't actually one person or one function within a bank or any financial institution who kind of has the aggregate knowledge to know what the future state's going to look like or how to deploy it. You need your operations, your legal, your regulatory, your technology, your business across all different business units in sometimes many different geographies. You need your innovation people, your strategy people, your strategic investment people, like the list goes on and on. They all need to be at the table. And so I think what we've managed to do and we're excited about is we have literally hundreds and hundreds of people engaged from these 54 institutions globally in all these different areas trying to solve micro problems. But the wave is strong, and that's true of the way we're all collaborating as well with Microsoft and with Blockapps and Consensus. We're all kind of attacking one thing at a time. Then we'll get there. But the systems integration one is the big kahuna, right? What about those billions of dollars of money we spent? It's a tough C-suite level conversation, right?
Yeah. We do have some time if we wanted to take some questions from the floor. There's a microphone right here. If anybody has any questions, don't be shy.
So is the R3 network they use specific bank tokens? Like each bank has its own token, or are you going to kind of zero in one?
So to clarify, R3 is a consortium, and we're working on, like I said, all aspects of this technology with many, many partners outside of R3, not just our member institutions, but also like the technology companies who are here with us, but many others. So that's primarily what we are. It just so happens that we are also building a distributed ledger, and we, as Marley rightly said, we believe that there won't be one. There's not going to be one ledger to rule them all. So in some respects, the question is sort of we are not representing one method of doing anything at all, and would never sort of stick a philosophical stake in the ground about how we think things should be done. We might generate some conclusions via the consortium, which hopefully will help everybody. So in some respects, it's sort of not the right question to ask. But what I will say is that we are exploring every different type of method out there, so that we can generate real conclusions. You know, when we did a project back in February, and we had 5 ledgers up at the same time, and which had never been done before. We had 40 institutions all hooked into 5 ledgers all at the same time. It was kind of a dramatic moment for us to. And one of the things we learned is they're all very different, right? Those different platforms, and all the institutions are different too in how they approach it. That no one actually knew how to adequately look across different platforms and evaluate how good or bad they are. Like as an industry, we just didn't even know. I remember we had a panel at our own internal conference a few months ago, and we kind of tried to ask people the question. We didn't know. Nobody knew the answer. It was just a whole bunch of, well, maybe we could do this, and maybe we could do that. So the question you asked is kind of the right one. Would you do it this way or that way? And I think we as an industry need to get much better at saying, okay, now we're all going to answer the question. That's not the right way to do it. But we're not very good at that yet, actually, which is kind of odd in a way for the distance we've already come. Hope that wasn't just a dramatic evasion of your question, but it really was.
There's a question?
You talk about knowing the end state. Can you describe what you think the end state would look like to a business user or a customer or individual?
Good question.
It's a really good question, and that would be kind of like asking someone in '94, when people were still talking about the information superhighway, what Google will look like. I think we're in the very early stage of really understanding this technology, and what we have seen is that, I was a web developer back in '94, '95, and at that time, all the websites, people would hand me a physical brochure and say, make that, but online. So what we're seeing today is, what current analog of business processes that are utilizing this technology. But in the future, I think what you're going to see as this technology is more pervasive, completely new methodologies of using it that really we can't imagine today.
So, but from what I'm listening to, I'm thinking, okay, the lady from Samsung is saying,
Yes.
and would you visualize a customer walking in with their phone, for instance, and saying, okay, I'm getting a procedure done for, say, for my teeth, right? And it involves an insurance agent or an insurance company, I should say. And then some of that is going to have to come out of your own financial institution money, plus your medical or dental records are going to be changed, right? All in one scoop. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Like you go in and say, okay, I'm going to pay this, and my insurance company is going to know I had a billing done and what group it was. They're going to send money to the dentist. The portion that I owe is going to come out of my account, and all those records are going to be secure, but it's going to be one moment, one thing, instead of right now where I pay my portion, the dentist dials into their insurance thing, submits the information comes back.
Yeah, I think what you described is what we would probably imagine as the 1.0 version of what will happen. The next iteration of that are things like, maybe you want to see who will give you the best price on your dental procedure, and different people will bid automatically depending on your demands. So, like I said, is that to kind of basically make the exchange of value frictionless, that's the first element of this technology. But it goes well beyond just payments. It goes really to the transfer of any unique asset. So it could be stocks, it could be land rights, it could be IP ownership. All of these things are possible.
Still going to be like my thumb or my
It's going to be many devices based on different levels of authorization. Just to give you one example, we did a proof of concept with Ubuntu, who did a phone. And this was an identity project, and there were two identities. The first identity someone had was, I want to split a check for dinner with my friends. So you receive a notification, you use your thumbprint, and then that's fine. The second one was, I want to approve as a board member a $50 billion merger. Close to what you guys just did. So you know, I need a majority of the board. I need to see everyone's votes. And you know, that might need a thumbprint. It might need you to enter additional authorization. It might need you to send you know, a document to a particular location. And those possibilities can be done automatically without human intervention. You don't need an individual to kind of make sure that all that paperwork is done. A smart contract can just make sure it happens and then verify that.
You know what's interesting is this analogy is always fun. The Model T, right? The people made cars before Henry Ford made the Model T, and people had mass production. He didn't invent mass production. It was actually he invented the mass production of cars. So he brought actually those two things together. And you look at the original and beautifully written paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, which you should all read. If you haven't, it's genuinely a really kind of accessible piece for the most part. And what he had done is bring cryptography, which had been around forever, the notion of sharing ledgers, which had been around forever, and other sort of consensus mechanisms, which had been around forever. Like, he didn't invent any of those things. But he actually, or he or whoever Satoshi is, put them together in a way that was truly ingenious and solved one specific problem beautifully well, and it still does, which is sort of, you know, a permissionless society where you can exchange value anonymously. And it feels like that's a lot of what's going on. Like, there isn't a lot of inventing of new stuff per se. It's actually, how do we pull it all together to create new opportunity? And it's kind of, people kind of don't want to hear that we don't know the future yet, but your kids are going to love it, as you know, as per the quote in Back to the Future. But that's kind of the situation. We couldn't possibly have thought of Uber 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, right? How could that even be possible? Now we all take it for granted. We're trying to live that again. It goes back to where we start, that duality of, we know there's a vision, but what do we need to do today to make sure we keep going and not get lost in trying to sort of make wholesale sort of statements about the future state? Because if we all trust in ourselves to get there, collaboratively we'll get there.
Yeah, I think that the combination that we've never at this scale seen the opportunity to have mass collaboration across industries. So the dental example is one where you would do one transaction, identify yourself using biometrics on any device, and have it automatically figure out what your deductible portion of the payment is, what the insurance portion of the payment is, the doctor, you know, be able to update the medical records, receive payment, your deductible being updated in real time as to how much you have left in your deductible, and you know, all of that stuff happening, and that hit several different systems all at once. But if they're all collaborating, that's just one scenario. You can think of you know, the purchasing of you know, Amazon's business model could be completely blown up. Uber's business model can be completely disrupted. So once you get this collaboration, it's the people that step back, and it's really the business people that will step back and go, oh my goodness, I mean, in my supply chain, I do these things, and from a consumer standpoint, or as like one of my customers, whether it's a B2B scenario, you're going to find efficiencies where you're going to compose existing values from different industries together to create, you know, things that we can't conceive of yet, because we have never seen this level of collaboration. We call it the collaborative economy. Some call it the Internet of Value. But I think it's the collaboration and people saying, I'm in, this is how you're going to work with me in a standard way. And we're going to see amazing innovations coming out of this.
You know, actually, in some respects, it should it should turn on its head the notion of ownership. So here's an interesting example for financial institutions. Think of all that market data that you currently use. We spend so many billions of dollars. You know, you've all seen the charts of what everybody's aggregate spend is. And in many cases, it's basically some company who's getting information from you and selling it back to you. And it's kind of annoying when you really think it through, but there's no other paradigm, so we have to go about it that way. And there are market forces that drive the prices down, but at the end of the day, it's still expensive. What if, and this is true of institutions and of individuals, what if you owned every piece of data that came from you as an institution or yourself? And you then had the opportunity, because everything was noted and recorded and reconciled and there was a consensus mechanism that mean that we always trusted in the one truth, the unicy, the facts as they are, that you could then charge people for the use of your data instead of the other way around. That kind of sounds more like the way it should be. Like, my data is my data. I want to be paid for it if you want to use it. That suddenly, this paradigm allows that to become a reality. We're actively, I'm sure you guys are too, we're actively looking at projects where we're trying to kind of prove these concepts. That changes the game so dramatically, and you know, the mind boggles about what that could actually ultimately mean, you know.
I'm noticing that we have a red flashing light down here, which means that our time is up. And so I just wanted to say thank you very much. I mean, big things I got from this are, you know, trust is the key differentiator here, and distributed, and having sort of the democracy of trust behind the distributed ledger, and collaboration. I think you've each used that word 4 or 5 times at least, and that's been a huge theme. And we don't really know where this future is going to go, but it does have the potential, and again, I also believe, to be one of the bigger disruptors that we've seen in our recent time in payments. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.